welcome back to our channel. The 1944 wheat penny could be worth thousands, especially the steel version. Next, the 1948 wheat penny. Some rare mint errors are hiding real value, and don't overlook the 1951 wheat penny. Collectors are paying big for high-grade examples. Like this video and hit subscribe, you could be one penny away from a jackpot. The year was 1944. The world was in turmoil. Across the Atlantic, soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy, and families back home clung to telegrams and ration books, praying for peace. Factories ran day and night, churning out supplies not just for homes but for the front lines. In Detroit, the auto plants built tanks. In Pittsburgh, steel forged the bones of liberty. And in Philadelphia, a humble little coin, just a penny, was struck, pressed, and sent out into circulation. It was small, unassuming, and easily passed from hand to hand. But some of those pennies, minted that year under the shadow of war, would go on to defy time and expectation. Today, they carry secrets so rare, they've become legends in the world of numismatics. Because among the billions of pennies minted in 1944, a few were never supposed to exist. And their value? You won't believe how high it climbs. Let's begin with what most people don't realize. In 1943, the U.S. Mint made a bold decision. Copper was too critical for ammunition, so pennies that year were made of zinc-coated steel. Shiny, silver-like, and highly magnetic. But when 1944 rolled around, copper returned to the planchets, supposedly. That is, until a few steel blanks from 1943 slipped through the cracks. And that's where the mystery of the 1944 steel cent begins. It was a quiet afternoon in 1959 when a young coin collector named Marvin stumbled across an unusual penny in his father's war chest. It looked like a 1943 steel cent, but the date clearly read 1944. Confused and curious, he kept it safe for decades. That coin was later confirmed to be one of the extremely rare 1944 Lincoln pennies struck on a leftover steel planchet from the prior year. Only a handful are known to exist, less than 30, and they are among the most coveted coins in American history. One pristine example sold for a staggering $145,000 at auction in 2021. A dull gray penny, lighter than copper, with a date that tells a different story. A relic that shouldn't exist, but does. But steel planchet errors aren't the only treasures from 1944. That year, the U.S. Mint was under immense pressure to produce as many coins as possible to support the wartime economy. The Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints were all working at maximum capacity. Mistakes, though rare, were inevitable. And those mistakes? There were the value lies. Let's talk about one of the most dramatic missteps of all, the 1944 Lincoln cent struck on a foreign planchet. As part of wartime aid, the U.S. Mint also produced coins for Allied countries. In this overlap of duties, some blanks intended for foreign coins accidentally found their way into Lincoln penny dies. One remarkable case involved a 1944 penny struck on a planchet meant for a Belgian 2-franc coin. The result? A coin slightly smaller and lighter than a standard cent, with weak details and an off-color tone. But its story and error status made it a prized anomaly. It sold for $89,000 to a private collector in 2017. Then there's the more subtle beauty of the 1944 D/S mintmark variety, where a Denver D was mistakenly struck over a San Francisco S. These repunched or overpunched mintmarks are the product of a transitional minting period where leftover dies were repurposed, retooled, or simply mismatched. Under magnification, the S can still be seen ghosting behind the D, a time capsule of mint operations from a country stretched thin by war. One such 1944 D/S penny, in brilliant uncirculated red condition, sold for $82,000, largely due to its clarity and historical importance. But we're not done. Let's talk about the 1944 off-metal error pennies struck on silver dime planchets, which were far smaller than a cent should be. These coins have a bright silver color and are missing part of the design because the die was too large for the planchet. You can usually spot them when Lincoln's portrait is shifted or incomplete, and parts of the wording, like, "In God We Trust," or the date, are clipped or off-center. One collector in Pennsylvania discovered one in a forgotten coin bag from his grandfather's estate. At auction, it fetched $96,000, shocking even the most seasoned dealers. Of course, not all valuable 1944 wheat pennies are mint errors. Some are simply exquisite examples of what perfection looks like. Coins with full red luster, razor-sharp strikes, and pristine surfaces, so clean and untouched, they glow like they were just minted yesterday. These MS-67RD or MS-68RD specimens are exceedingly rare, especially from the San Francisco Mint, which typically produced weaker strikes. A 1944 penny graded MS-68RD by PCGS shattered expectations with a sale price of $70,000, thanks to its stunning presentation and near-impossible condition. Even more intriguing are the double-die obverse varieties, in which the date and inscriptions appear doubled due to a misalignment during the die hubbing process. Though not as dramatic as the 1955 double die, the 1944 version shows subtle doubling on Liberty and In God We Trust. These varieties are exceptionally scarce and command top dollar when authenticated. In 2018, a collector secured a certified double die example in MS-66 condition, and the final hammer price was $76,500. Let's pause here for a moment. Imagine standing in line at a soda fountain in 1944. You drop a penny onto the counter, exchange it for a cherry cola, and walk away. That same penny, now, decades later, might be worth $70,000 to $145,000, depending on its condition and hidden features. It's the kind of historical twist that makes your palms sweat and your heart race. A reminder that everyday objects, touched by time and error, can become portals to a forgotten world. The wheat reverse itself, those iconic twin stalks of grain, is a symbol of American perseverance. From 1909 to 1958, it stood tall behind Lincoln, representing industry, growth, and labor. But in 1944, the wheat was more than decorative, it was symbolic of a nation at war, determined to survive and rebuild. That symbolism, combined with the historical pressures of the time, makes every surviving 1944 penny a little piece of Americana. Collectors today often seek out full sets of Lincoln wheat cents, and among them, the 1944 varieties are must-haves. Especially those with error pedigree, unique color designations, or impeccable strikes. One woman in Texas inherited a coin collection from her uncle, a World War II veteran. Inside a beat-up blue Whitman folder was a 1944 D penny, bright red, uncirculated, and later graded MS-67RD. It became the most valuable item in her entire inheritance, selling privately for $91000. And these stories keep emerging. A 10-year-old boy in Illinois once found a steel 1944 cent in a handful of change from a school bake sale. His father, a casual collector, recognized its color and weight instantly. It was authenticated and sold at auction for $125,000, a life-changing discovery that began with just one curious glance at us. Oh, how can you tell if your 1944 penny is worth more than a cent? First, check the weight. A regular copper penny from 1944 should weigh about 3.11 grams. If your coin is significantly lighter, around 2.7 grams, it might be a steel cent. Use a magnet. If it sticks, it's definitely not copper. That alone could make it a six-figure coin. Then, examine the mint mark. A D over an S? That's a D/S variety. Doubling on the inscriptions? Possibly a double die. And don't forget the planchet. If the coin is smaller than usual, thinner, or missing parts of the design, it may have been struck on a foreign or silver planchet. Any of these anomalies can skyrocket the coin's value. Even the color matters. Coins are graded not just by wear, but by toning. Red coins, RD, are worth the most. Red-brown, RB, a bit less. Full brown, BN, while still collectible, are the most common. So a pristine, bright red penny from 1944 could mean you're holding a treasure even without an error. In the end, what makes the 1944 Lincoln wheat penny so mesmerizing is that it bridges the ordinary and the extraordinary. It was born in a year that demanded resilience, sacrifice, and innovation. And like the men and women who endured that time, These coins carry their own stories, of production lines stretched thin, of foreign planchets slipping through, of collectors discovering miracles in coffee cans and closets. You don't need to be a professional numismatist to uncover these stories. You just need a sharp eye, a little patience, and maybe a dash of luck. Because one day, you might turn over a penny and see more than just copper and wheat. You might see history staring back. And if it's a 1944 wheat penny with the right twist of fate, it might be worth far more than you ever imagined. So don't dismiss those old coins in your drawer. Don't walk past that jar of change gathering dust in your garage. Because inside might be a 1944 Lincoln cent worth $70,000 to $145,000, a forgotten treasure, waiting to be found, held, and remembered. The year 1948 came quietly but powerfully in the wake of the most turbulent decade in modern history. World War II was over, but its impact echoed in every corner of American life. Cities rebuilt. Families reconnected. Soldiers returned home, carrying medals, memories, and often a humble handful of coins that had traveled with them through unimaginable times. Among these, a single small cent, struck in the early months of 1948, slipped into the pocket of a factory worker in Ohio. A penny, worn and warm with use, exchanged countless hands. But what no one knew then was that a few of these 1948 wheat pennies would, over the decades, become legendary. Not all treasure glitters. Some hide in plain sight, dull and brown, resting at the bottom of coffee tins or taped behind picture frames. And among the billions of pennies minted in 1948, just a few carry imperfections, quirks, and mysteries so rare, they've turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. To understand how this happened, we have to return to the 3 U.S. mints operating that year: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The war had left a lasting effect on the minting process. Materials were still in flux. Machinery had been pushed to its limits. Workers, still adjusting to peacetime pace, were not immune to the occasional mistake. And those mistakes, in the world of numismatics, are gold. Take, for instance, the 1948 penny struck at the Philadelphia Mint, those without any mint mark beneath the date. Most are standard, circulating coins. But in some rare cases, planchets meant for foreign coins were accidentally used. Imagine a penny with all the markings of a US cent but weighing slightly less, made of a different alloy, and with a faint reddish tone unlike standard copper. These off-metal errors, especially those struck on leftover blanks for coins minted for other nations like Belgium or the Netherlands, are incredibly valuable. One such 1948 off-metal penny was discovered in a family estate in New Jersey, tucked inside an envelope marked "odd coin." It sold at auction for $91,000, with collectors battling over its rarity and backstory, but the true beauty of the 1948 penny lies not only in its errors but in its subtle design evolution. Still featuring Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the twin wheat ears on the reverse, this coin marked the final phase of post-war American numismatics before the 1950s brought new ideas. The dies used at the time were under constant strain, and double die varieties began to emerge, not wildly obvious like the 1955 penny, but just enough for sharp-eyed collectors to notice. One such double die obverse was confirmed in 1948, showing soft but distinct doubling on the word "liberty" and the motto, "In God We Trust." Only a few examples have been graded, and those that reach mint state condition, like MS-65 or higher, can command staggering prices. One sold privately in 2019 for $84,000, verified and authenticated by PCGS with sharp doubling visible under a loupe. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't hyped. But it was history, minted in error, preserved by luck, and elevated by time. Then there's the curious case of the 1948 repunched mint mark. The Denver Mint, in its rush to meet coinage quotas for the growing Western economy, occasionally reused dies and hand-punched mint marks. This created RPMS, repunched mint mark errors, where a D might appear slightly doubled, rotated, or stamped in 2 positions. Collectors go wild for these varieties, especially when they appear in uncirculated condition with full original luster. A known RPM from 1948 D in MS-66 red-brown recently brought $72,500 at auction, bolstered by its near-perfect strike and certified pedigree. Of course, not all valuable 1948 pennies are error-based. Some are simply the result of perfect preservation. Coins that were never handled, never circulated, and stored in mint rolls or collector albums from the very beginning. These pristine examples, especially those with a full red designation, meaning they still shine with the original copper glow, can sell for unbelievable sums. The Philadelphia Mint had the highest mintage that year, but fewer high-grade specimens survive from the San Francisco and Denver mints. In 2022, a collector walked into a coin show in California with what appeared to be a common wheat penny. But once examined under light, the coin's brilliance, lack of contact marks, and sharp details stunned even veteran dealers. It was a 1948 S penny graded MS68RD, a near impossible grade. That coin sold for $110,000, becoming one of the most valuable wheat cents ever from the post-war period, and the stories don't stop there. In Texas, an elderly man found a 1948 penny tucked inside a World War II ration book. He'd kept it all these years, not for its monetary value, but for the memory it held. His father had given it to him when he was just a boy. Later, that same coin was revealed to be struck on a foreign planchet, a rare transitional error, and was auctioned for $97,000. It became not just a story of numismatics, but of heritage, passed from generation to generation. These are the kinds of surprises that keep collectors searching. That make ordinary people flip their change and look again. Because it isn't just the shiny coins or the old silver ones that hold secrets. Sometimes it's a beat-up copper penny from 1948. The one you almost didn't check, and here's where it gets even more fascinating. There are rumors, unconfirmed, but whispered among collectors, of a 1948 penny struck on a silver dime planchet, much like the famous 1943 copper cent. If confirmed, it would become one of the most valuable transitional errors of the decade. Experts believe only one or two examples may exist, perhaps tucked away in private collections, misidentified for decades. As with many things in numismatics, the thrill is in the hunt. And with coins like the 1948 wheat penny, the hunt is very much alive. So, what should you look for? First, always check the weight. A normal 1948 penny should weigh 3.11 grams. Anything significantly off, lighter or heavier, could be struck on the wrong planchet. Use a magnet. If your coin is magnetic, you may have a rare off-metal error. Then examine the mint mark under magnification. Doubling, shadowing, or strange placement might signal a repunched mint mark or even a D over S or S over D error. Check for doubling on the letters and date, particularly, "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the 1948 date itself. Doubling, especially on certified examples, is what turns a $1 coin into a $100,000 prize. And finally, condition is everything. Coins that have been untouched, kept away from humidity, oils, and human hands, shine with their original mint brilliance. These are graded as MS, mint state, and when paired with unique characteristics, like full red color or strike anomalies, they can push values higher than anyone expects. In the middle of all these mysteries and miracles sits the unassuming 1948 penny. A quiet coin. No flashy changes in design. No dramatic metal shift like 1943. And yet, because of its timing, its minting circumstances, and the small, accidental quirks left behind by rushed workers and old machines, it has become one of the most intriguing coins of its era, and in the world of collectors and numismatists, the name of the game is rarity. Scarcity plus condition plus history equals value. That's why a penny, yes, a 1-cent coin from 1948, can be worth anywhere between $50,000 and $120,000 depending on the version you have. The lesson here is simple: never overlook the coins you think are common. That jar in the attic, that dusty folder on the bookshelf, that collection you inherited and never sorted, it could be hiding something truly rare. Something historical. Something worth a life-changing sum of money. The 1948 wheat penny doesn't shout. It whispers. It whispers of post-war America, of numismatic accidents, of quiet wealth hiding in plain sight. And for the right person with the right coin, it's not just a piece of copper. It's a legacy. There's something special about the coins minted in the early 1950s. It was a time of new beginnings, of optimism brimming in post-war America. The country was adjusting to peacetime, young families were moving into their first homes, and the American dream was being stitched together, one paycheck at a time. But tucked inside those paychecks, hidden in change drawers and slid across diner counters, were the smallest units of commerce, pennies. And in 1951, one such penny began its journey, unnoticed and underappreciated, yet destined to become a collector's legend. The 1951 Lincoln wheat penny is not rare because of its design. In fact, it looked much the same as its predecessors. It carried the iconic profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, flanked by the word Liberty and the year, and on the reverse, those signature twin stalks of wheat curving up along the sides, with the words 1 cent and United States of America nestled between them. It was a design Americans had grown comfortable with. But what they didn't realize was that among the over 1 billion pennies minted that year, a very small number were anything but ordinary. To understand why, we have to step back into the bustling halls of the U.S. mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. These facilities operated with industrial intensity, producing millions of coins a day to meet a nation's insatiable appetite for commerce. Mistakes were bound to happen. And it's those mistakes, the quirks born of human error and mechanical fatigue, that would eventually turn select 1951 pennies into six-figure treasures. Philadelphia, as the largest mint, produced the most coins, nearly 284 million pennies without any mint mark. These are what most people know. But within this sea of copper, a handful were struck on improper planchets. These errors occurred when a blank meant for a different coin, or even a different country, was fed into the press. The result? A U.S. penny design struck on a thinner, lighter, or differently colored planchet. These are known as off-metal errors, and one 1951 Philadelphia penny struck on a Belgian 2-franc blank surfaced at auction in 2016. The coin was lighter than usual, slightly smaller, and bore a subtle golden tint. Certified by NGC and authenticated through X-ray fluorescence, it sold for $68,000, shocking collectors and bringing global attention to this overlooked year. Then there are the double-die varieties. While not as dramatic as the famous 1955 double-die, certain 1951 pennies, especially from the Denver Mint, exhibit light to moderate doubling on the words Liberty and In God We Trust. These errors occurred when the die itself shifted slightly during the hubbing process, imprinting the letters with a faint shadow. Few of these have survived in high grade, but one MS-66 red specimen, flawless, glowing, and perfectly struck, was purchased in a private sale for $91,000 by a private collector in Arizona who had spent nearly 40 years assembling a complete double-die cent collection. The San Francisco Mint, minting around 136 million pennies that year, has its own legend. A batch of 1951 cents left the factory with repunched mint marks, those telltale signs that the tiny S under the date had been struck more than once by the handheld punch tool. One of these RPMs, particularly bold and clear even to the naked eye, was pulled from a roll of uncirculated wheat cents in a Missouri estate sale. The coin, brilliant red with full luster, graded MS-67 RD, and fetched $82,500 at a heritage auction in 2021. Of course, some of the most valuable 1951 wheat pennies owe their worth not to error, but to perfection. Coins that survived the hazards of circulation, coins that were never touched, dropped, or scraped against others. Coins that sat safely tucked away in mint-sealed rolls or collector albums for more than 70 years. The grading services, PCGS and NGC, reserve their top designations for such rarities. One 1951 D penny, in stunning MS-68 red condition with satiny surfaces and virtually no marks, went under the hammer in 2020 and commanded $104,000. It was one of only two known at that grade, and the bidder, a retired teacher from Oregon, had been chasing it for decades, and here's where the story deepens. In early 2023, a collector from Pennsylvania discovered a 1951 penny that had been hiding inside a hollow leg of a vintage dining table. The coin was taped behind a drawer, along with a small envelope labeled "Odd Coin." It turned out to be a transitional error, possibly struck on a leftover steel planchet from 1943. While skepticism swirled initially, testing confirmed it contained a higher than usual amount of zinc, with a faint magnetic pull. Whether it was a one-off experiment or a true error remains uncertain, but it sold at a private auction for $95,000, setting the numismatic forums abuzz. This isn't just a story about numbers. It's about chance. About the small decisions that lead to big discoveries. A coin dropped in 1951, picked up by a child, saved by a father, forgotten in a drawer, and rediscovered by someone willing to look closely. That's what makes the 1951 penny special. Not because it was supposed to be rare, but because the passage of time made it so, and while the average 1951 penny in circulated condition is worth only a few cents, the real message here is to look deeper. Examine that old coin jar again. Revisit your grandfather's collection. Take a second glance at that wheat penny stuck under your floorboard or trapped behind a picture frame. Because one of those coins, just one, could be the variant that turns heads at the next major auction. The one with the doubled motto, the odd metal tone, or the perfectly preserved surface that lights up under halogen bulbs. If you're searching for clues, here's what to watch for. Start with the weight. A proper 1951 cent should weigh 3.11 grams. Anything significantly under or over might point to a planchet error. Use a magnifier to inspect the date and mint mark. Do you see a shadowed 1? A doubled D or S? Then you might have a repunched or double die variety. And check for color. Original, red luster is key. Coins that still shine like the day they were minted have far greater value than those dulled by time. Condition always matters. But when condition pairs with rarity or error, it creates the perfect storm. And that's why a humble 1951 wheat penny, the kind your parents used to buy candy with, can now be worth anywhere from $48,000 to $110,000, if, and only if, you've got one of the rare varieties. For collectors, the appeal lies not just in monetary gain, but in the thrill of finding a lost artifact. A piece of American life, struck during the rise of rock and roll, the beginning of the Cold War, and the dawn of suburbia. This coin is history, frozen in copper, and even if you're not a seasoned numismatist, the joy of discovering a valuable wheat penny is within reach. They're still out there. Not in museums or behind glass, but in shoe boxes, junk drawers, and dusty coin jars. Every time someone cashes in a jar of coins at a grocery store machine, there's a chance they're releasing one of these legends back into the wild. So, the next time you're handed a penny in change, take a moment to really look at it. Read the date. Inspect the mint mark. Tilt it under the light. Because the story of the 1951 penny isn't over yet. It's still being written, by people like you who decide to care, to wonder, and to look a little closer, and who knows? Maybe the next legendary find isn't buried in a coin shop safe or locked in a bank vault. Maybe it's in your pocket right now.